when someone says a board, there's an image from like a Wall Street movie or, somewhere where there's like a dark table, everyone's really serious with suits on. And, I think there are some boards like that, but actually the majority of boards can be quite informal and quite a fun experience.
Hey there, I'm Steve Loflin, and welcome back to Scholar Scoop. How does board service fit into your career path? And what does board service even really mean? Today's episode connects directly to something we care deeply about in this community: leadership that makes a real impact. I'm joined by Marlo Lyons and Naomi Kent to talk about their new book, Wanted, A Board Career. And if you're thinking, isn't that something you do at the end of your career? That's exactly why you'll want to listen to this episode. We talk about what boards actually do, the different types of boards out there, and how you can start building relevant experience much earlier than you think, even in college or very early in your career. If you're someone who wants to think beyond just landing your next job and start thinking strategically about long-term leadership, this conversation is for you. Now let's get some Scholar Scoop from Marlo and Naomi. Hey there, Marlo and Naomi. Thank you so much for joining me for some Scholar Scoop today. How are you two doing?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for inviting us on.
No, it's so great to have you. We have some exciting things to talk about. I know that you two have worked collaboratively to put out a great new book. And I also have had the pleasure of knowing Marlo for a while. She's been super supportive of a lot of the work that we do at NSCS. So I really appreciate Marlo. But it's the first time I'm meeting you, Naomi. So I'm wondering, take like a minute and maybe give us a little bit of your background. And then we'll do the same for you, Marlo. But I think let's start with Naomi for the first timer here.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So I've been working with boards of directors for over 23 years, and I run a practice today that works with individuals who want to build a board career. It can be any kind of board career. It can be anything from a nonprofit organization to an advisory board to a Fortune 100 corporate board. So that's the passion area that I am in today.
Oh, that's awesome. And just a little hint, that's going to be a big part of our conversation with your new book. So we'll jump into board participation in just a couple of minutes. Marlo, why don't you give us a quick little rundown on your background?
Sure, I am an executive team and career coach. I've been doing it for well over a decade, probably much longer than that, but certified for over a decade. Work with mainly Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, individuals as well, and basically just helping them enhance their leadership skills and just get clarity and confidence in their leadership. And I also have a podcast. It's called Work Unscripted. Our new book, as you know, Wanted, a Board Career, is out. So it's super exciting about that. Third book, and hoping it hits the same awards and the same bestseller as the first two.
Yeah, you mentioned it's your third book, but I know your first two books were also big hits. And I know for us at the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, we've really appreciated participating in your Wanted, My First Career. Um,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
which has been really good. And I feel like you have this evolution of stages that people might go through, right? You sort of have this, you want a new career or you want your first career, or here we are today to talk about a board career. Is there anything connected between the three? Do you see it as an evolution, or how does it work in your mind?
I do. I mean, I think everything is about skills and capabilities and how you build your skills and capabilities for the longevity of your career. So, wanted, my first career is how do you get that first job, right? How do I look at all of the things that I've done in internships and in college and look at it from a skills perspective and a capabilities perspective? And then wanted, a new career is about transitioning careers. Hey, I don't like what I'm doing anymore. I want to do something different. So, how do I use the skills and capabilities that I have, but prove that I can do this new thing? And wanted, a board career is really the culmination of all of that. Because if you start young and you really have a skills acquisition mindset and you're thinking about what skills am I gaining, because eventually I want to do board service, or I want to do board service when I'm even younger, when I'm doing it when I'm in high school or when I'm in college or even right after college, whether it's a nonprofit or, um, whether you're doing some advising. So the board career is, how do you get a board seat, but how do you use all those skills and capabilities to get there? And how do you build upon it throughout your career? So it's definitely an evolution. And I hooked up with Naomi to write this book as the resident expert in boards. And of course, being an executive coach, most of my leaders want to be on boards, and I've helped them get on boards. So working with Naomi has been amazing, quite frankly. And this book, came to fruition in about a year and a half of work together.
Well, I was going to say, I almost believe it was about a year ago right now that you and I were having a coffee outside in warm Scottsdale, Arizona. And we were talking about sort of the book we were working with you on. And then I said, well, what's next? And you're like, well, I have this idea for this book that's going to be about board careers. And I'm not sure if a year ago you were already well into planning this, but you talked about it as though it was this kind of concept that you were really pulling together and noodling over. So
It was
congratulations
great.
on bringing that to fruition. And it's always great when you can bring in other folks and work collaboratively to really get the message across. So Naomi, it sounds like you've really got a lot of background in helping people navigate the whole board experience. And I'm just curious, I run a nonprofit, so I'm really familiar with nonprofit boards. And I have some thoughts on that we can talk about in just a little bit. But what are the different kind of boards that are out there that people could consider being a part of?
Yeah, I think there's almost like an image when someone says a board, there's an image from like a Wall Street movie or, somewhere where
Yeah.
there's like a dark table, everyone's really serious with suits on. And, I think there are some boards like that, but actually the majority of boards can be quite informal and quite a fun experience. You have on the low end your not-for-profit organizations. You have, even in those in the book, we break them down. A charity, for example, is very different from an industry association. And what we have promoted in the book is that certain nonprofit organizations can actually help boost your career. They can create leadership opportunities. You can do some networking, right, that otherwise you
Mhm.
wouldn't do. And then also, it kind of gives you visibility in your firm as someone that isn't just coming to work every day, but actually has other activities that they do that are actually on along the lines of professional development. And so, those, if you're a younger listener here on the call, as Marlo said before, people have said the biggest regret they have is that they didn't start sooner. And
Mhm.
so my advice is to start and to look at, maybe there's a not for profit that has a junior board, maybe your local professional association has a board, and maybe you become a member and then you gradually become part of that board. And then there's something that has actually started to really balloon in, I'd say, popularity in the last 5 years, which is what we call an advisory board. Now, an advisory board is a group of people. They're not fiduciary responsibility, right? They don't vote in the CEO. They don't have any kind of vote in the company, but they provide strategic advice for the CEO and often maybe a couple of people in the leadership team. And actually in the AI space, we've been seeing a lot of advisory boards popping up. In fact, just on Friday, a client of mine said they got on the board of an AI company and we were helping to put together some collateral there. So these AI
Mm.
companies are looking for not people with AI expertise, but actually the expertise in the industry. So that's another area that people should consider if they're in their maybe 30s, 40s, 50s. And then after that, of course, there are lots of different types of corporate boards. You have small businesses, large businesses. You have different types of ownership, like a family owned or a private equity backed company. So the
Mhm.
experience is very different, Steve. And then also the requirements of the board members are very different. So when you think about it like that, it's not just that Wall Street, image that
Right.
we all have. It's quite complex. So that's why this book is a great read for those who are thinking, God, where do I start? Right.
Well, and I think, where do I start with all of my questions? You gave me a lot to think about here, which I think is really important. And I know, first of all, to get into one of those seats at any of those types of opportunities, it probably boils down to the skill set and what the capabilities are that you bring to that seat to make you a valuable contributor in that role, right? And so I know, Marlo, you work with lots of executives and things. What's your perspective on the skills that are actually important and necessary and maybe helpful to people that are thinking about one of these opportunities?
Well, and that's what's so interesting because it's never one skill. You have to look at what the board already has on the board, right?
Yep.
Because you might say, I'm a great advertising executive, but if they already have advertising covered on the board with somebody else who's a board member, they may not need that skill. They might need somebody who's more either go to market or somebody who's more, HR, has human capital capabilities. So it's not necessarily always what you bring because you could bring a lot of capabilities, but also what does the board already have and what do they need to fill in with? Where are they struggling? What skills and capabilities do they need? So you have to look at what they need and then how do you match what I have and what I can bring to that. But some of the basics, the big basics, governance. Governance is a
Mm,
big piece, right? Because that's what boards do. They govern. They don't run the company. The company is run by the executives. And so they're governing. They're not actually doing, they're overseeing. And so I think being somebody who can move from that mid-level manager to that executive and then that strategic leader is really about how am I moving from the doing place to the overseeing place to the governing place. And if
mhm.
you have governance, which is insight, foresight, capabilities, and you have really how am I looking at things holistically from an enterprise standpoint? How am I looking at things from not just what's my goal this quarter, but what are the goals in 5 years? So you have to elevate your thinking, right, as you're moving up in your career and the capabilities that you need. So it's not one specific, like, I'm really great at advertising. It's how do I look at that bigger from an enterprise perspective, a long term perspective, and also do they need, you always need those things. Those things are always
Yeah.
needed on the board, that governance perspective. But then what expertise do I bring in that, looking at things from that perspective?
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of times when I think about like the title of your book and you think about a board career, oftentimes careers kind of resonate with like a job that actually comes along with some money and compensation. What's your experience with boards and being compensated? Is that something that's happening more or less, or is it an unreasonable thing to ask for?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, there are people who do make a career out of it, and usually, though, it's at the latter part of their executive career, and that's one of the reasons why it will be an easier transition into a board career if you've already got some board experience. So that definitely helps. In terms of pay, you know, not for profit organizations, I think in the main, there may be a few that are not, but in the main, they are volunteer or roles.
Mhm. Yep.
But they're great places to get experience, build networks, and gain that leadership experience. So I like them for a lot of reasons. But once you've had that experience, you could, again, a strategic advisory board could be maybe zero point 0.5 of a percentage point of equity, some sort of share in the business, or you could get some sort of pay every time you are in a meeting or every time you're on a call. So it could sort of it look like a consultant contract in a way. Then when you go to actual fiduciary boards, you could be looking at a combination of equity, pay, or just equity or just pay, depending on the business. At the low end, we're seeing anything from about ten to $15,000 a year, all the way through to $500,000. So it's sort of like it can
Mm,
be anything. The one thing that I will say though is that the most lucrative board opportunity that I ever heard about was from someone that I knew. He was building a business and he told a woman, listen, I'd love you to join my board. She had great credentials. And he was this sort of company that he wanted to IPO, right? He wanted to go through an initial public offering and become a public company. And he said to her, listen, I want you to join my board, but I can't pay you. And she went, wow, I've got this other opportunity that is paid. And he said, listen, he convinced her over a lunch. He said, you must join my board. Anyway, she decided she was going to take the risk. She joined his board, no pay, no nothing, but was given equity, of course, in the business.
mhm.
That resulted many years later in a $15 million, payout. right? Because of the business
Mm.
IPO'd, et cetera, et cetera. You can just imagine. So what went from a free board volunteer role turned out to be very lucrative. So all we're saying here is that the initial pay is not necessarily everything about a particular business. But again, you can also get equity and the company fails, right? So there's some risk
Right.
involved in that. But Steve, it's somewhere in between. A lot of clients are anywhere between 50 to $100 a year to be a corporate board member.
Yeah, that's good to know. I never really quite understood how that worked. I've had some friends, like you pointed out, that are kind of sunsetting just being in the workplace and they're looking for their next opportunity. And a couple of them have said, now I'm pursuing, board opportunities that are going to compensate me for everything I know and all the people I know and all those things. So I'm always like, good luck to you. I hope that works out. Now I know a little bit more about the potential for that to work out. Sounds like the opportunity to be on the board that you were giving as an example. It reminds me of people that get into the startup business generally, right? You're sort of taking a risk on that to become something incredible. But I think startups really probably do have a lot of opportunities if you can find your way to connect with the startup community. And there's a lot of cities now that have really robust startup communities. And in those places, they might be looking for board members, which makes me curious. Do you have suggestions for where you actually learn about board opportunities, or where do you find these opportunities in a way that you can actually present yourself as a good option? Any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to start. I think one of the best way to find board opportunities is through your network. Right? And that's in our book, right? We're very
Mhm.
clear that you're not going to be going onto a website for the most part and looking for board opportunities, because it's through your network where they already know your value. They already know you. They know that you're ready to be on a board, that you've prepared to be on the board, that you're speaking like somebody who understands oversight versus being an executive. And so, you start with your network and it's not, hi, John, I want to be on a board. Do you know of anything? It's, hi, John, this is what I'm exploring. And you try to create that connection again, right? Or you build upon that connection. You let them know what you're doing, what you're interested in, and then you continue to put it out there. But you have to be fully branded. Like you have to know what you're talking about. You have to have your branding. You have to have your statement. You have to understand that it's not just a, hey, what can you do for me? It's, can I help you? Because as
Mhm.
Naomi mentioned, when you're joining a board, it's not all about the money and they can sniff out if that's all you want is the money. They're looking for somebody who's going to bring value and also is passionate about that company, right?
Mhm.
And wants to be and provide, wants to provide their knowledge and expertise and give back in a way that helps a company grow. So if you're just looking for the money or you're not aligned with your values, they'll be able to figure that out and it won't be the right fit. So finding the companies for yourself, finding that top 10 companies that you're interested in, finding relationships that can help make introductions to the right people, to either, the nominating committee or even the board chair, to have, more casual conversations about your interests. But
Yep.
remember, every conversation, as I always say, every conversation is an interview. Every conversation. So it's never casual, even if it's casual. Naomi, do you
Yep.
want to add to that?
Yeah, we very well, I'm both of us, but I am especially very passionate about advising people on how to get prepared before going out to speak to their network. It's like anything. It's almost as if imagine you didn't really know what kind of job you wanted to have, but you went out and started to talk to everyone and just said, I don't know, I'm just looking for a job. What do you think I could do? That's
Right.
a terrible way to start your career, right? So same sort of thing with boards, get that plan together, know what you bring, know what you're going to do, have a bio, make sure your LinkedIn is optimized. Um, and for those who are thinking about a not-for-profit or some sort of starter board, then just create a resume, right? Just have a resume that says, hey, and if, you know, what do boards want? What do non-profit boards want? They want you to fundraise, right? They want you to oversee the executive director. They want you to maybe volunteer and go to events, organize the annual gala or whatever it might be. Put that in your resume. Just write it in. Put, hey, prepared to, help out at events, prepared to volunteer X number of hours in a month or whatever that may be. So just, to make sure that you're ready for the opportunity, it's more likely to come about.
Well, I also think sometimes just hearing your description right there, the obligation of a board member is oftentimes pushed you to doing things that could be unpleasant too. And I don't know if you paid a lot of attention to like higher education, and a lot of the boards of these higher ed institutions have had to make hard decisions about their presidents and leadership, and they've had to take on a lot of negative PR problems that have happened. And so there is a side of that too that I think you should probably be aware of, right? If you're going to go into a board role, you might be put on the hook to do some things that could be not altogether fun, but really important for the long term sustainability of the company or organization. Do you see that happening too in your work?
Well, I think that's part of the governance part, right? Like your job is to govern for the stakeholders and for the, for the school or for, any, organization. When you don't see governance and you see people, kowtowing in some way, you get Enron. That's what you get, right?
Yep.
When you get people who don't understand what they're doing and they aren't looking at things deeper and they're being told, "Oh, don't worry about it," and they're just going, "Okay, I really want to keep my board position because it's paying me a lot of money." That's when you don't get the governance that you need on a board. And so, yes, you have to take the role seriously. This isn't
Mhm.
oh, gee, I'm on a board now. I can talk about it on the golf course or at the pickleball court, right? It's a very serious role because you are governing a company
Mhm.
or a nonprofit organization or whatever board you're on, and so I do think that some decisions was some of that governance is going to be hard, right?
Mhm.
But if that's what's protecting the company and protecting the stakeholders, which is your job, and stockholders, which are stakeholders,
Yep.
then that is your job, right? And the
Yep.
other thing to just think about also, being on a board takes a lot of time. This isn't like it may sound like, "Oh, gee, we meet quarterly. Great, done." There's a lot of prep work before those quarterly meetings, right? I've been on a board
Yep.
before and there's a lot of reading, right? And there's a lot of prep work so that you come in prepared. Not only have I been on a board, but I read a lot of board documents for some of my clients who are CEOs and are preparing board documents for the board meetings. And so, there is a tremendous amount of prep work. And there might be some follow up work and there might be some follow up phone calls and some other work. So it's not just, "Oh, gee, I go to one meeting once a quarter and then I'm done." So you have to really take that into account as well as, do I have the time to put in the right amount of effort to bring the right value to the board?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know it is a big time commitment. And I do think part of the time commitment is really trying to get to know the organization or the company. And oftentimes I've seen in my board meetings or a couple of boards that I've served on, like I don't know the company from the day to day perspective, yet I'm really expected to make some decisions that are related to how the day to day work is going. And the only way to get on top of that is to really spend enough time to try to understand what's going on so you can ask really good questions. And through the process of choosing, do most boards that you're aware of, Naomi, do they have nominating committees, or what's a typical process that you've seen to get onto a board? Is it like interviewing for a job, or is there a different approach that boards take to bring you into the company?
Yeah, again, it can. I think if it's a fiduciary board, then yes, there will be a formal process of bringing people onto the board. An advisory board, you might just have a chat with the CEO, and they'll bring you in, right? And maybe
Yep.
just make everyone aware of what's going on, but there certainly wouldn't need to be a vote. So on a fiduciary board, yes, you'll have a what's called a nomination or a nominating committee. And what they will do is they will gather together, figure out a little bit what we were talking about earlier about the sort of skills matrix. It's called the skills matrix, where they're like, what are we missing? What do we have? What are we missing? And what do we need? And for a not for profit, it could easily be. We have sponsors from all these industries, but not from these industries over here, right? How do we build on that? Who does anyone know anyone who's in those industries who would be interested in sponsorship or volunteering or whatever it might be? And so each organization will have its own set of what it's looking for. Now, then what they'll do is they'll start their sort of most companies will go and look to their networks to find candidates. And the reason they do that is because search firms, again, unlike a job search where you'd probably go to a recruiter of some kind, a search firm is very expensive to use. I mean, their services are top notch, high premium products, premium services. And so only the largest companies can actually pay for those. So most businesses, most small, medium-sized businesses, and definitely not for profits, unless they're very large, won't be using those types of organizations. So you really do have to look at your network, and this is maybe a call out to everybody listening. Build your network, maintain your network, continue to go and meet new people, but continue to nurture the ones you already know, because whether it's a board opportunity or a job opportunity, you're going to be leveraging and needing those people at some point. You don't want to be that guy that just pops up when they need something, right? Hey, I just lost my job. I thought I'd reconnect, right? So maintain that. So networks are critically important, and then the interview process can be anything from, at the low end, a couple of meetings where you meet with the board, you meet with the CEO, everyone's thumbs up because someone has already recommended you, to I've had a client who's been interviewing for 12 to 18 months with a for-profit public company, because it needs to
Oh,
go through all the channels. And you need to meet the board. They need to have a board meeting. Then somebody says they're retiring. Now they all go back to the meeting room and say, what do we actually need? And then back again. So, and then we talk about it in the book. It could be something informal like a dinner or lunch.
mm.
And then we'll go back to what Marlo said earlier, which is every interaction is actually an interview. So you have to be prepared at all times to be having the right conversations with people about your board career, if it is a corporate board that you're seeking out. Because anytime you meet with someone, even us meeting with you, Steve, right now, right? You're creating an impression and you're creating a brand that people will be thinking about another day when someone says, "Hey, we need a board member who has these skills or these experiences," and then somebody puts you forward for that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I've seen it also, and this might be unique to our board, but there's also, because people have what I think is a good experience on the board. So if they're coming up on their term limit or there's something that is going to move them along, we've had really good success with them making recommendations for someone or reaching out to someone that now that they know the organization, they know what it entails. Here's a person that I think would be really good, and it really does just magnify what you're saying, that sometimes you have to be, in the room, you have to be talking to people, and people have to have an experience and then they have you come to mind first, right? And I think that is really true with so many things in life. And I also know, knowing that you have this book coming out, when you think about the book being available, um, is your ultimate hope that you'll see people become more confident about thinking about the board opportunity, or that you'll just find a path to just create, more awareness of boards in general? Like, what's your goal for the book?
That is so funny that you asked that. Naomi will probably chuckle at this as well, but we actually had the word confident in the title at one point.
Oh, okay.
And confident in seeking a board career, and then we shortened it, right? But yes, it's about, what do I do to get on a board? I'm thinking about doing it. How do I do that? And we literally walk you step by step. It is a playbook of how to go from I'm thinking about wanting to be on a board, figuring out what kind of board you want to be on, how do you brand yourself, how do you prepare yourself, how do you interview for a board, how do you talk about yourself. It takes you from beginning to end, all the way to negotiating, what that means, how to work with recruiters if there are recruiters involved, which are called board search consultants. So it really is that playbook to give people confidence of, if this is something I'm interested in, now I can figure out what kind of board work will work, right? What kind of board
Yeah.
should I be on, or will fit with my values and what I'm interested in, and then how to take it all the way to the end, to actually get onto a board. Really, I hate to use the word brain dump, but it's a brain dump of Naomi and me, right? Of what we
Mhm.
do for clients all the time. And it's a brain dump of every technique and tool that we use with some stories peppered in as well. And the audiobook is awesome because Naomi and I did a little chit chat before sections 1, 2, and 3 because we have discovery, preparation, and execution. And we did a chit chat and we tell some stories. So you get a little bonus material with the audiobook.
And is that how your perspective is also, Naomi, in terms of what you hope people take away from the book?
Absolutely. And there really wasn't anything out there like this. And really there was a lot of talk about how to be an effective board member in the boardroom. And I think that's critically important, but there's a lot of material on that. I think what's missing is how do you get yourself prepared and positioned to be on a board? And Steve, there's a lot of bad advice out there, right? And we
Uh-huh.
actually go through some of these myths right at the beginning, like people will tell you, oh, go and join all these professional networks and run around at lots of big events. Or they'll tell you, they say this network, 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 like,
Yeah.
location, location, look. I mean, what
Yeah.
does this even mean? Right. And
Right.
and so everyone's sort of scratching their heads going, well, I've got this advice, but I just don't know what it means or what to do with it. And they're in a space that's completely, new to them. So we wanted to break it down and, I'm certainly Marlo was very helpful in writing and editing my writing. I am not a,
Vice versa.
a
And vice
Shakespearean
versa.
writer.
Naomi did the same for me and
Yeah.
clarified areas as well,
Yeah, I
right?
think a
Which
few
is great.
chapters, it just sounds like me talking. But that's kind of what we wanted. We wanted to break it down, not in fancy, big language, but make it easy for people to understand and break it down so that people could actually do something with it, right? They could take an action out of it.
And it's for all
Well,
levels, Steve. It is all levels. It's for the person who's in mid management, who's thinking about a board career now or later. It's for the early career person, quite frankly, who's thinking at the end, I'm going to want to be on boards or I want to be able to do that even on nonprofit boards now. It's also for the senior executive who is thinking about retiring. So this isn't just a quote retirement book. It really is written for everyone at every stage in their career. And what I love about the book is that it gives you an idea. It's almost like, especially if you're early in your career, it gives you an insight of how you need to grow as you grow
uh
through your career. Because whether you want to be on a board or not, there's so much insight on how you need to be talking, how you need to be branding yourself. And so that's it really, it's definitely targeted, right? It's targeted for those who want to be on boards, but there's just so many insights that pretty much anybody could gain knowledge and experience from it and insights from it.
Well, I think it's important for people to hear this. And I know from my experience with a nonprofit board, within the organization, we also have what we call a National Leadership Council, which is made up
Mhm.
of students who are somewhat the advisory board role that you were talking about, Naomi. But two of those students, one serves as the president and one serves as the vice president. And those two students serve on our actual board of directors. So as the president and the vice president of the National Leadership Council, you get the opportunity to serve for a year on the board of directors. And I know you've met actually our current president, and she's amazing. And I happened to do a scholar scoop recently with a former NLC president. And it was one of the things that she brought up as a highlight of her college experience was getting the opportunity to be on a national board, to interact with the people who were on that board, and the networking that you both have talked about, that from the people that she met as a student on the board with professionals and people that were far along, and how she's continued to stay in touch with them for
Yeah.
various reasons. So I think what you have put together is a tremendous resource. And it's very generous of both of you to put your brains together and to have this resource and book for so many people that I know it will be helpful. And I really appreciate you taking some time to give out some really good scholar scoop. Any other things that you would like to add before we
No, I
get
I think your story is spot on, and I had the same experience. I joined a nonprofit when I was 28, and it really changed my life. It changed a lot of things, and so many people. But making the right decision about the right board, that's great. But you can also make the wrong decision and get on the wrong board. And so this book is also about that. It's like the guide, right? And it's, how to avoid the pitfalls, how to do things a lot faster and easier. And I wish I had access to that book, when I was young. Um, but
Yeah.
uh, but you're right, it can be a phenomenal career move. So
Yeah. And Steve, kudos to you for putting them on the board because what
Mm.
phenomenal experience to get when you're in college to be on a national board. Wow. It's
Yeah.
like, it's almost like your whole career will go full circle from the beginning, all the way to hopefully board service when you're an expert in some area. And kudos to you because I don't know how somebody that young, right, in their 19, 20 years old would be necessarily on a national board. So what a great experience and the mentorship that you must provide them as well through that process. And the experience that they give you from the student's perspective, which makes them experts because they are the students that you're serving. So it's
Yep,
wonderful. Thank you for having us.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. What you just said is what I really believe is, like, their skills that they bring to the board
Mhm.
are really revolving around the fact that they're a high achieving member of the organization,
Yeah,
and they have a lot to bring to the conversation about our priorities and how we make decisions
absolutely.
on what to do. So, well, thank you for your time today. This has been amazing, and it has me thinking about what types of boards I want to explore being on. So I'm looking forward to diving into your book even more. And I will be sure to add that in the notes on how to get to the book. And especially, it sounds like we want to get the Audible book and get that podcast at the end. So
A lot of
There you
thank
go.
both of you. It's been such a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Hey,
Steve.
thanks, Steve. Thanks very much.